All right, my friends, it is time for us to do the heavy lifting, if you will. Now, I made this video yesterday, perfectly, I might add, but for some reason, it just didn't, my audio did not pick up. And so I'm messing with my microphone right now, trying to get this sorted. But anyway, what we're going to look at today is sort of the big piece of information that everyone keeps throwing in your face. If you are searching YouTube, if you are following anyone who's super bearish on real estate or super bullish on like gold or something like that, they'll always talk about how everything else is crashing. And there's some legitimacy to the information that has come about. And so when that happens, what we have to do is we have to not necessarily take it at face value, but do the research and see, what does this actually mean? Where do we actually stand? Because one thing that's going to happen from now until forever is that everyone's going to say, oh, like the big crash, the '08 crash. You know, this is worse than the '08 crash, or this number is more than the '08 crash. You know, they're always going to be comparing to that. So we should look at this. And the information is available. Now, this is all coming from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Data, all right? And you get all kinds of stuff in there. And what we're going to look at today is three things. We're going to look at homeownership rate. We're going to look at the total number of households, right? Because that's our demand side of the equation. And we're going to look at supply. And this is the one that's really been talked about lately. And there's a couple of caveats I want to make sure we're aware of when we're looking at this. Monthly supply of new homes. This is what everyone's talking about. New home supply has reached levels that are similar, or we haven't been this high since 2008. Well, that's not exactly true, first of all. A lot of that data that you've seen is not necessarily accurate, at least if you believe the Federal Reserve. You know, we're not quite as high as we were back then, but we have seen inventory levels spiking. So let's evaluate the situation, okay? So if we look back, the peak of inventory for new homes was in January 2009. I believe the stock market bottomed in March of 2009. And so this was really the worst part of the market. This is when everything was its most horrific. We had 12.2 million homes for sale. New homes, so brand new homes. New construction, right? 12.2 million. All right, where are we at now? Now we're at 9.3. Most recent data from last month, so pretty recent, 9.3. What's the difference there? Well, that means we're about 25% less. So we've got 25% less new home availability, inventory, now than we did at the worst moment for the crash, okay? So 25% less. Now that by itself, and this is important because this is what everyone's doing. This information by itself is not enough to make any kind of conclusion. You cannot draw a single bit of conclusion from this chart by itself because it's only one side of the equation. It's like if I told you, hey, you know, you make $1 million a year. Are you happy? The first question you should ask is, well, what are my debts? What is it? Hey, I'm going to give you $1 million a year, but you have to pay me $2 million. It's not a good deal. You have to know what the other side of the equation is. So this is the supply side of the equation. Now we need to look at the demand. Demand, as I've been preaching for so long, let's shorten this up. This is going back, but look at the demand side of this equation. Look at household formation since the 1940s. Look at this. This is crazy. There were 35 million households in 1940. And most recently in 2023, there's 131.4 million households. So if you want to know why does real estate continue to push higher and push and push and push, it's because the demand side of the equation, look at it. Look at the demand side. Look at this. That is one of the most beautiful graphs you could ever see. If you were invested in something and you could chart and plot the demand side of the equation and look like this, it would be beautiful, okay? And that's exactly what this is. So let's go ahead, though. We don't need to go back to 1940, okay? We're talking about, you know, the 2000s. So let's just get that up here. Now, in 2009, and this is annual data, okay, because this is like census stuff. So 117 million households at that time. 117 million, and now we have 131 million. It's a difference of 14 million. And that 14 million is about a 12% increase. So we've had a 12% increase in households formed, okay? And we have 25% less inventory. So we have significantly less inventory than we did before the crash, at the peak of the crash. And we have 12% more demand. Does that sound like we're even talking about the same thing at all? Not at all. Not even close. But there's more to it. So now when we look at this, we can see just very quickly, now that we've seen this side of the equation, we see the demand side. So demand has increased by 12%. Supply is down 25%. And here's the important thing about this graph. This supply creation and absorption is at prices that are much higher than over here. Back here, prices were half. I mean, a third of what they are today. So you're seeing this supply absorption at much higher prices. That is hard for me to quantify. That is very difficult to put into words or to express how much more bullish that is. In other words, people back here when houses were super cheap, fire sold them. Over here where prices are much more expensive, they're being absorbed and purchased and held. It's just so powerful. But there is more to this. There is more to it. There's one more layer that we can use here to see, do we really look like things did in 2008 before the crash, or in 2009? Is this really comparable? The other piece of the equation is this, and this is probably the most interesting indicator that I've seen. In fact, I've not seen a single indicator that gave such a good warning about the crash. An incredible warning. Look at this. In 2004, so Q2 of 2004 and Q4 of 2004, we hit 69.2% on the homeownership rate in the United States. 69.2%. And that's the highest it's ever been, and we were in totally uncharted territory. Okay, because they started tracking this back in the 70s, or it's like 1965, and it started at 63%. That was the lowest. We had one dip here in homeownership rate, and that was in the early 80s. There was a banking crisis there. And so, and we had the stock market crash and stuff, I think actually happened over here, or in the 87, right in there. So that kind of created a bottom. And then we've just gone up and up and up and up and up. And so no one at the time, if you couldn't see to the right of this, you would not have thought, okay, well, this is a signal. You don't know. Now we know. Now we know that, because that's a very high rate. I mean, almost 70%, 7 out of 10 people own a home. That's a lot. But if you look at even where it is today, 65%. So that's not bad. That's pretty impressive, honestly. But look at this. This was the best indicator that we couldn't have possibly known, but looking back, it was. But that's sort of the exhaustion point. Why is this important? Because at a certain point in time, and it looks like it was 2004, there are no buyers left. A market gets exhausted to either direction once there's no one left to buy or no one left to sell, and that's when it turns around. So when a capitulation takes place, when a crash happens, and people capitulate. What does capitulate mean? That means that they fire sell. You capitulated if you bought a stock at $20 and it went up to 28 and you're just checking it every day, and then all of a sudden it went to 18 and you're down and you sold it. You just capitulated. You sold it, you got your capital out, and you took a loss even though you were up on it for months. That's capitulating. It's the worst thing you can do. So that happens though once all the capitulation is over, once everyone has exited. All the possible sellers, like in that stock example, they've sold. There's no more sellers. So now it's time to go higher. Here, there was no more buyers. At this level of homeownership, there was no more buyers. Now, if you look at these zigzags right here, okay, see those guys? That was Wall Street tampering with the market to try to keep this up. This was them. They were creating programs, no income, no asset, no nothing. You can buy a house. You got a 620 credit score, I can get you a 100% loan. Insane. So it was something that they were creating products to try to keep this going because they had a good thing going. They were printing money. And then they ended up defrauding just about everybody in the world. But that's what that was. So what we can now learn is that once we get to that point, that really shows us that there aren't, and it's a percentage. So it's because it's a percentage, this can translate over to time. Whereas like if we look back at the monthly supply, we can't really translate this in time because what do we have today? We have 12% more households. So we can't look at these numbers as equal. We have to look at them as a percentage of the total households. And that's important. And when we look at that, we see that right now we're dramatically healthier than we were back then. I mean, it's not even close. And then if you look at the homeownership rate is much lower. A couple percent, 65. Well, let's see, we're talking about 2009. But you can see when the market peaked at 69, we were down to 65 and a half. 2009, we're 67. 67 and a half right in there. So that right there shows us that this is kind of a peak area. Now look at this, happens to be interesting. Q1 2009 right here, and then the last topping we had was in COVID right there, which is a very similar place in the chart, 67.9. So the homeownership rate can kind of give us a clue as to, when buyers might be exhausted. There might not be any buyers left. And so we're going to actually take a look at this. I'm going to keep this chart saved, and we're going to keep a look at this. And when we do get to that point, I don't think we will. I think you're going to continue to see the homeownership rate decline, unfortunately. People are getting priced out. And but if we do see it get back up there, we can know that, hey, that might be a sign for us to take a look at things and take a little health check, get a little checkup. Because right now, we don't see any issues in this front. And by the way, we have, the Fed meeting tomorrow. Will they decrease rates? Will they hold them the same? Will it be a quarter point, 50 basis points? We don't know. Seems increasingly like there's not going to be any rate cuts. And that's a bummer, but it's a reality. And we'll just have to see what happens. Mortgage bonds are holding up pretty nicely, considering, this resistance is being held. And so I'm still expecting higher bond prices and lower mortgage rates, but you don't know. We'll see. But as of right now, looking at this data, I don't have any concerns. And believe me, if I did, I would tell you. I've been looking for the holes in this market for so long. And every time people send me videos, people send me, YouTube links for these people who are talking about crashes and say, hey, does this make any sense? Because they're scaring people. That's the point of those videos. They're trying to scare you because that's how they get clicks. It's all about fear. And these YouTubers are learning what the news has known forever. If it bleeds, it leads. That's what people want. I don't know why, but that is what they want to see. It makes them click. It makes them interested if you tell them something bad is going to happen. And so that's what these guys are doing. Without this type of analysis, not a single person is really doing this type of analysis. So that's why I said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it live. I tried to do it live yesterday. My microphone didn't work. But now that we've assessed the situation, we can see 25% less inventory, 12% more demand, and a 2%, at least 2 to 4% lower, let's call it 3% on average, 3% lower homeownership rate. So we have 12% more opportunities, households, less of those households as a percentage own homes, and overall, we still have 12% less inventory without factoring in the higher total number of households. So just straight, number for number, we have 25% less homes for sale. And by the way, reminder, these are just new homes. This doesn't factor in the entire market. And so the question becomes, should we even be using new homes? Should we even be using new construction to test the health of the market? Should we? Because new homes are always going to be the highest price. They're always going to be top shelf as far as cost goes. They're nice. They're that nice bottle of wine, but they're expensive. They're expensive. It's the most expensive product on the market. So if we are just tracking the most expensive product on the market, and not the entire market, then we have to ask ourselves, does this make any sense at all? Is there any reason to even look at these? It's like if you're trying to figure out what's going on with retail sales, do you look at Walmart or in what they're selling, or do you look at Gucci? I mean, Gucci will tell you something, right? It tells you something, but does it represent the overall market? It's a fair question. I don't think it does. And so I think for the most part, this exercise is somewhat silly, but this is what everyone's talking about. So this is what we got to talk about. So we gave you supply, demand, and then potential. And potential is this homeownership rate, which has another 4% to go. Well, what's 4% of 131.4 million? I'll give you a clue. It's about 5 million. So that's just 5 million more in potential home buyers, which far exceeds, what the total supplies will be. So ultimately, I don't think there is any concern at this point with the real estate market from the standpoint of, hey, there's a crash, lurking around the corner. In fact, I would say just the opposite. And this is my final nugget for you, and this is probably the most important. If you're arguing with people about this, this is the most important thing to note. What causes a crash, when we look at this crash to happen right here, that was pretty significant, right? Went from 69% homeownership rate all the way down to 62 or 63. During that time up here, banks were being very irresponsible. So when a crash is forming, what happens is people try to keep the party going, even when the signs are that they shouldn't. And that's what happened here. The Wall Street continued to, create loan programs to try to bring demand to the market. And they kept getting more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive, more business, more business, more business, more risk, more risk, more risk. Those are the signs that a market is getting unhealthy and is going to become fragile. Right now in the mortgage market, we have the opposite happening of what happened back then. Back then, it was so loose. Everyone was competing for business. No one wanted to downsize. Now, opposite. They downsize so fast. They underwrite right now. Right now, we're underwriting very, very tight. I mean, extremely tight underwriting on everything, even just basic refis. I mean, everything's really tight. As much as that sucks, it's a great sign that the market is healthy. There aren't holes in the mortgage side. You look at what's happening in the insurance industry. I keep getting calls. My dad called me. Hey, my homeowner insurance has been like $1,400 for the last 8 years, and they just raised it to $1,800. What's going on? I tell them, hey, look, they're doing this everywhere. They're doing this everywhere. Insurance is going up. Oh, they're just being greedy. No, it's as healthy. They're telling people no, and they're raising rates. That means that they've identified, that they weren't as healthy as they wanted to be, as they should be, and they're making the adjustments. If we were looking at a crash in insurance or something related, what we would be seeing is the opposite. You'd be seeing people competing and fighting and dropping premiums and lowering rates and doing all this stuff just to try to get the business in, without respect to the bigger picture, without respect to the longer time frame. And so we're not seeing that. You're seeing tightness in the insurance industry. You're seeing tightness in the mortgage industry. You're seeing tightness in the banking industry. Those are all healthy things. It's annoying, but it's healthy. It prevents bad things from happening, crashes from happening. And so right now I feel like we are much more protected. That said, we are still at the whims of the Federal Reserve, and whatever they're going to do tomorrow is going to dictate a tremendous amount about what happens next. And that's a shame, but that's the structure, that's the central bank world that we live in. Maybe one day we will live in a decentralized Bitcoin utopia. Me and many other people hope that. But for right now, we certainly do not. We are at the whims of the bow tie guys. Good luck to us all. Hopefully this helps.